thank you for tuning into the Electric Church podcast. And on the podcast today, joining me once again, returning, is Pete. Nice to have you, brother. Cheers.
Well, thanks, Craig. It's good to be back.
So, I guess there really isn't all that much to talk about except probably the CV-19 virus, huh?
Yeah, that seems to be the topic on pretty much everything in recent days anyway.
So yeah, we are, what is this, 22nd today, 18th, I believe they ordered everything to shut down at like 5 o'clock. Well, not everything, but restaurants like me can only do to-go orders or drive-through or pickup service. I know tattoo parlors and salons are closed.
Yep.
Grocery stores are making a killing right now.
Yeah, grocery stores. I think Walmart and Costco are doing real well.
I want to whiff that microphone up just a little bit towards you. There you go. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, Costco, Walmart's making a killing right now.
Yeah, like they needed any help.
Right? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I have seen a couple of places. Obviously Amazon is going nuts as well.
Yep.
But I have seen a couple of places where they're offering their employees a little bit more per hour now too, which I think is at least hopefully that's a benefit to those folks anyway.
Mm-hmm.
I mean I've seen some interesting memes out there that sort of related to the fact that now people are starting to recognize the value of people like nurses and workers in
truck drivers.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Our supply chain and people who clean. And the folks who are restocking the grocery stores. So if there is any one good thing that maybe can come from this, that I can see is that maybe some of those overlooked professions are maybe going to come to the forefront, and people are going to see and acknowledge how important they are in daily life. I mean, regardless of any kind of weird viral emergency. I mean, those folks are an integral piece of our communities anyway.
Yeah.
And I think have been truly undervalued and kind of behind the scenes. And now it's like, oh, hey, that's pretty important to have those grocery stores stocked.
Yeah. Yeah, blue-collar workers are truly the backbone of our society.
Oh, absolutely.
I think they get looked down upon, by society far too much, I guess kind of a good microcosm of that is a restaurant, all the hard work of the chef at the top doesn't really mean anything if there's not a guy washing the dishes.
Oh, absolutely.
To put the food on that the cooks make, that there's a whole chain of events. But if there's no clean plates and no clean silverware, then there's no people getting served.
Oh yeah.
They're kind of they're on the bottom rung of the totem pole, so to speak, but they are just as essential as the guys at the top.
Well, the interesting thing about that, when I lived in Vail, which was longer ago than I care to think about, but I kind of waited tables and stuff at this fondue place, and then they had like a deli that they did like breakfast and stuff in the mornings, and the vast majority of our kitchen staff lived in Leadville, which is a mountain town. It was a former mining community, but it was a lot cheaper to live in than Vail. And the vast majority of our kitchen staff was from Mexico-ish.
Mm-hmm. Ecuador.
Yeah, yep. And they all spoke Spanish, but the thing is they lived up the mountain because it was way too expensive to actually live in Vail. But on occasion, what would happen is there'd be an avalanche in the pass, and none of those folks could make it in. So my boss, knowing that I had the capacity to at least cook a breakfast buffet, would occasionally call me in early. He'd be like, hey, man, there's another avalanche. I need you to come in and help me with the buffet. And I'm like, I can throw some eggs on a giant flat top and make scrambled eggs for a buffet table and things like that. Again, I'm no chef by any means, but I can cook some stuff. Mm-hmm. So, but it was readily apparent at that time how big a piece those folks played. And I mean, because the restaurant really couldn't operate. I mean, so of all of our menu stuff, that had to be cut out, and we had to do just buffet only because that was about all I could handle.
Yeah.
I mean, I can throw in big trays of sausages in the convection oven quick. And,
when you're missing a large section of a crew, I mean, that's all you can do is offer. Yeah. Yep. Or when you're overwhelmed with when we do when NHRA does their nationals here.
Oh.
Yeah, we just do a buffet now is what we did this last year. It was so much easier because you're so overwhelmed with people to do off the menu.
Right.
It's just insane. People just end up waiting a long time. And
for sure. Well, and that was so I cut my teeth at Madden's when I was 16.
Okay.
I was waiting tables, but I spent enough time in the kitchen, and I was an expediter and stuff for a while. So even though I didn't actually really cook when I was in that role, I observed enough of it that I was able to transfer that into being able to help out in some other areas when I moved to different restaurants. So, yeah, I mean, each piece of that, and again, I mean, if you don't have people, like you said, washing dishes too, I mean, if you got no clean plates,
yeah,
nobody's eating, and just people that again, often are looked down upon, buffet runners and stuff like that just you're feeding the masses, and at Madden's at least back at that time, it was very much a convention business. So you got to feed 250 people within 45 minutes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's no realistic way to do that with a menu.
No. Yeah. Yep.
So.
Yep. Yeah. I experienced a little dabbling of that at Grandview as well.
Oh, sure.
I didn't actually ever work in banquets, but I would get pulled over into the prep area to help them out sometimes. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, just putting out insane amounts of food in a very short period of time. And the only way to do that is a lot of bodies.
Oh, yeah.
Hours beforehand.
Yep.
Well,
and
just
truly,
grill marking chicken breasts and throwing them in the oven.
Oh, yeah.
And, yep. Yeah. Cook this 20 pounds of rice. And,
right.
Yep, yeah.
Truly a thankless job and not fun for the creative types so much.
Right. Yeah. 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 I mean, it's food wise, it's equal to factory work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But again, it's important. I got to think I've never worked in food service for a school or anything, but I got to think that's fairly similar.
Yeah.
Type job because you're coming out with this is what this meal is today, and we got to put it out for 200 and however many students or whatever place that you're working at.
Yeah.
So. Again, and those things, and I think to kind of segue back into the COVID stuff in the community, you look at how school is for a lot of kids in our community one of the few consistent meals they get
for sure, yeah,
throughout the week, particularly for the folks in our community who live in poverty or maybe have parents that aren't around a lot. And it's been, I think, remarkable and positive for me to see how the community around here has stepped up and, is really making sure that those kids aren't getting left behind because the schools are shut down. Mm-hmm. And that's on a lot of people. I mean, the educators seem like they've done a lot with very little to try to make the distance learning stuff work. I mean, it's hey, you have no notice. Figure out how to do this.
Yeah.
And so for so many sectors of our community, the folks have stepped up and really made some incredible things happen in a very short period of time. And that's when I see things like that, it kind of restores my faith in humanity a little bit, because when we all have to kind of go, all right, we got to put all the bullshit aside and make sure we get this stuff done. It shows that we can still do that and come together. Mm-hmm. And to me, that's a good thing. You hate to have things like this where it's forced to happen. But again, if there's going to be another good thing that comes out of this, is maybe that some folks who don't always see eye to eye on things can look at each other and recommit to and understand that really we have a lot of common goals as a community. So instead of being bitchy about it and snarky and like, I don't really like how that guy does his thing, sometimes you got to put the bullshit down and just get it done. And, again, I mean, it's people from all sorts of religious backgrounds and political thoughts and ideologies and all those things all coming together and doing what's right for the community. So again, if there can be some good that comes of this, I think that can be a huge piece of it.
Yeah, I don't think this is going to be quite a 9/11 event, bringing us together wise.
Sure.
But yeah, it does seem to have really tamped down the tribalism.
Yes.
Yeah, it seems like we're all sort of like, oh yeah, we're all Team America. So yeah, that definitely. I think you're right. Maybe we can refocus on that. We do all have the same goals.
Yeah.
We are all trying to make our country better. And yeah, I mean, realistically, the only way we are going to achieve that is by talking to each other about it and not by yelling at each other about it.
Well, absolutely. And I think that the rampant partisanship and tribalism, as you very well put that, over the last couple of decades has done nothing but sort of drive people apart. And as we've talked about before, too, I mean, a lot of times, we come at things from different perspectives, but ultimately we all have the same goal because we all want our communities to be better.
Yeah.
We don't want them to, nobody's out here cheering for people to fail. Well, I shouldn't say nobody, but primarily people aren't out there cheering for people to fail.
Yeah.
I mean, you do get those negative folks on occasion, and they come from all perspectives that are like, oh, I'm glad to see them fall on their face.
Right.
But, opportunities like this, I think we have to kind of come together instead of, and root for everybody's success versus trying to make people look bad.
Yeah, or trying to make enemies out of people.
Right.
Yeah, I think one of the things we've seen sort of evolve out of tribalism, which I'm using that term sort of in the Sebastian Younger.
Sure.
He used the, yeah, probably. I haven't read the book. I keep getting told I need to read the book, but I've listened to a lot of interviews with him. But
I've only read A Perfect Storm, but
I think one of the things that evolved out of sort of tribalism is it was evolving almost into class warfare, of like, yeah, I mean, to go there, I guess, people literally being upset at Jeff Bezos for being so rich and being so successful. It's like, man, he started this out of his garage, and I'm sure, like, the same people, like, who doesn't use Amazon? How is it not an amazing service to just, like, get on your phone, boom, I can order with one click, and it'll be at my door in 2 days. How is that not an amazing service? That's totally enriched my life.
Yeah.
I have no reason to be upset at Jeff Bezos. He's worth a lot of money. Well, he also gave me 2-day shipping on almost any product I could ever want.
Right. Yeah, and I'm so torn on that because, again, I certainly use it, and it has made my life a lot easier in a lot of ways. I mean, I'm definitely a big fan of, like, support local and try to help out small businesses in the local community. But at the end of the day, like, when I'm doing my Christmas shopping, I don't like being around that many people sometimes, and my life is a lot easier if I can just go on to Amazon and start ordering stuff, and it just shows up.
Shop local is great when I want to go to the Cocoa Moon and get a monster cookie and a cup of coffee.
For sure,
But if I want some Indian spices, you know what I mean. There's some stuff that I would need to either drive to St. Cloud or the cities for, and hope to be able to find the product, or I can go on Amazon and get it shipped to me. So yeah, I mean, shopping local definitely has its place, and even traveling somewhere to get something specific, sort of as a destination. That also has its place, but I mean, there's no denying how that has revolutionized, our society. That's incredible. It's enriched all of our lives. Like I said, what book do you want? Do you want to download it, or do you want a used copy or a new copy?
Right.
There's no bookstore that could really offer that.
No, not at all.
No.
Well, and that's the thing. I mean, as things evolve, like I remember kind of back in the day, Walmart being a very controversial entity because of their business practices and when they come into small communities and how they sort of choke out the local mom and pops because they have the capacity to sell things at a much lower price.
Yeah.
You know, because the smaller places don't have that ability.
Yeah, the buying power of extreme wealth.
Right.
The same. I mean, it's the same model that Costco operates on too. You know, I mean, when you're buying, you know, 1 million cases of something, you're going to get it at a much cheaper rate than if you're buying 2.
Yeah. Yeah, and you know, so the thing that I've found though that does make a difference, like you know, if you go to the Ace Hardware in Brainerd. I can walk in there, and I am not the most mechanically inclined human on the planet. I don't know a lot about fixing stuff, but I can go into the Ace Hardware with like a bolt or something and be like looking stupid at the front, and somebody comes up to me and says, "What can I help you with?"
Yep.
And I go, "I need a thing to fix this," and the guy looks at it, and he can figure it out, and he can go to the right place.
Yep.
And I don't have to spend hours wandering around aimlessly, not knowing what in the hell I'm even looking for.
Hardware stores are known for having great customer service. Yeah. If you walk into a hardware store, generally somebody there knows what the hell, or knows, hey, you know, we've got this other guy that he knows plumbing. You know, and that's again where you say you walk into your local Ace Hardware store where they're all individually owned and it's a brand that they're paying into,
right?
Versus going to a Lowe's or a Menards, you know, and it's like, you know, hey, where's, you know, I need a thing to fix this, and they'll be like, check aisle 4,
right?
Well, it's actually probably like check aisle 28.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's I did. Typically, I don't go to those places. I mean, you pay a little bit more at Ace, but I'm certainly willing to pay a little bit more so that I don't have to spend an hour and a half
trying to figure out.
Yeah, well, and trying to find it, and then I end up finding the wrong stupid thing anyway, because that's always the way it works for me anyway.
For sure.
Like I have a motorcycle, and I ordered some floorboards for the passenger because when I bought it didn't come with passenger floorboards, and it's a Harley. So being me, I went and I checked out at the local Harley purveyor what the floorboards cost. It was like $360. I'm like, right. So I go on Amazon, and I get essentially the same exact thing. That, you know, just the only difference. I mean, they're chrome and they're nice and they're heavy and they're well built, and the only difference being they don't say Harley on them. Yeah. And I'm like, well, the bike already says that, so I think I'm good.
Yeah.
You know, but it was like $128.
Yeah.
You know? But so when it showed up, you know, some of the bolts weren't exactly what I needed and whatever. So I ended up going to the Ace Hardware, and I walked in with the thing, and I was like, make this work. and the guy was like, okay. So he ends up pulling out the stuff that I needed, and it ended up working out just fine. But, you know, that was a huge thing. And if I would have gone to, you know, again, like a Menards or something, I'd be wandering around. Luckily, you've seen that meme out lately, probably, where they put John Travolta from Pulp Fiction looking at all the empty shelves.
Yeah.
That would have been me at Menards trying to find the right bolts.
Right. Yeah. Where is this? Yeah.
Is this the right thing?
Oh yeah. Yep. Yeah. I have spent way too much time at Menards, like comparing and like trying to figure out, looking at my phone or looking at the thing and like, no, this isn't, like, and the next aisle over, like, and I think I've spent so much time and so much frustration that I just would have been better off going to Ace.
Absolutely.
Being like, help.
Yeah. Well, so I think the moral of that entire story, though, is that for local, it's all about customer service. You know, I mean, because like you said, the ease of availability and just the convenience of Amazon is awesome, and it can bring us so many things, and so many things that aren't available in our area. But, you know, at that same line of thought, if you need something and you know you can get it here, you know, because I certainly couldn't have ordered the bolt off of Amazon. I don't think. I mean, I got the parts, but I didn't get the right stuff to put it together.
Yeah.
And, so being able to go to that local place. So, I think the wave of the future, hopefully, is a melding of those two and having that local customer service geared place that you can go to get your questions answered and get the stuff that you need, but then also having the ability to just kind of order stuff and have it come to you as quickly as possible. So hopefully that allows the local small businesses to stay engaged in their industry, maybe by tweaking their way of looking at things a little bit, but still providing that awesome customer service.
Yeah.
And then you still have then the Amazons of the world to bring the products to the masses, and particularly for those of us who live in rural communities, because like you said, I mean, there's some stuff. I mean, I remember being like, even when I was in high school, if you really wanted to go shopping for clothes, you had to go to
St. Cloud.
Yeah,
Yeah. I about once a month I go to St. Cloud to go to Granite City Comics.
Sure.
Because it's like,
well, there's nothing here.
Yeah, it's the one place within over 100 miles that I can go for brand new comics. And I might be able to get them direct ordered, but I mean, well, if there's anybody who's struggling right now over the past 50 years, it's been local comic book shops. So I don't mind making that trip once a month.
Right.
They hold exactly the books I want. I can email them. And be like, hey, this is coming out. Save this too.
Right.
So yeah, there you go again. Customer service.
And there's something to be said about being able to put the thing in your hand and kind of look at it and
yeah. Oh yeah, I could digitally download all of these.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the physical thing. It's like buying clothes too. I mean, you can buy clothes off the internet.
Yeah, and you never know how they're going to fit.
Yeah, I mean, with some things, I mean, if it's a brand you're familiar with and they tend to run the same, I mean, you can do that. I mean, there's certain jeans that I could probably buy on the internet that's fine, but
size 9 Crocs.
Well,
they're going to be the same.
Well, and I'm, I don't know. I think we all. Not one of us really wears stuff off the rack all that easily in this world. I mean, there's very small percentage of the population that is the size off the rack that can just perfectly find stuff that fits. So I mean, I've always been kind of this, I don't know, an odd body size, shape, whatever. So it's difficult to just buy stuff, So without having the ability to try on clothes, I get a little bit leery of making that purchase.
Right.
I mean, my soon-to-be sister-in-law was just talking about the fact that because my brother and her are getting married, and she was trying to help her mom find a dress, and she said she actually bought like $1,500 worth of dresses and had them shipped to her, so that her mom could try on these different dresses, because her mom hates shopping and she doesn't do well with it and all that stuff. And, I mean, I understand. And if you have the ability to do that, that's nice. I don't know that, I mean, because that's definitely a first world convenience type issue there.
I am literally like shocked and appalled that somebody would just buy $1,500 dresses off the internet on a whim, not knowing if any of them are going to work.
Right. Well, I mean, it was
with
the intention of being able to return a bunch of them, obviously, but it was. Yeah, I was kind of taken aback by that as well. But again, I mean, that's sort of the convenience, perhaps. Wow. Yeah. And again, not everybody has the capacity. I certainly wouldn't. Well, I mean, maybe I could do that, but I don't think it'd be a real good idea. I tend to be a little more frugal. But again, I mean, it's one of those things. I mean, you're doing a once in a lifetime type event, hopefully, and. But that's, I mean, so we were supposed to be their wedding was scheduled for April 22nd in Ireland, and so now that got kind of pushed out a little bit, as it turns out. Well, and how do you prepare for something like that?
No, that's exactly it. I mean, the CDC was really well prepared for this, so they're about it,
Yeah.
I mean, that's what they do every day is they go to work and they think about these things and they work on how to stop it from spreading really quickly. So I commend the CDC. Like it's it's one of those things where I get into it with some quote unquote libertarians who are really more ANCAP, where
Right.
they're like, oh, all we need is military, and some say we don't even need the police, we just need private security.
That's scary.
Oh, I know, and it's like, oh my God, cybercrime and disease, like we need a government structure
Right.
to take care of these things.
Yeah.
Yeah, FBI, even the CIA. I don't have a problem with a bunch of these alphabet government agencies doing their thing, keeping us safe. Yeah.
Well, they serve a purpose. I mean, in any sort of government function, you can always have abuse and
Oh, yeah.
inefficiencies and whatever. But ultimately, that's why we theoretically, I mean, we vote for people to go out and hopefully speak to our best interests and represent us in Washington, and then always work out the way we want it to, obviously. But but that's part of the process. And I mean, if you look at the government structure, I mean, it's not always terribly efficient, and maybe it's somewhat designed to be that way, because if you
absolutely,
you can't just enact law on a whim.
That was very much the intent from what I can understand from like the Federalist Papers and stuff. Is
Sure.
they didn't want government to be able to act really quickly.
Right.
They wanted it to be able to a slow, well thought process, so that you're not acting off emotion, but acting off countering philosophies.
Sure.
Yeah.
Which again, when it works in its ideal, it does pretty well. I mean, and again, we know that doesn't always pan out that way, but that's why we have the process that we have
And
to
we have
to
lots
try
of
to,
emergency powers.
Oh,
available.
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, and some of that's a little frightening too. I mean,
For sure.
I mean, the things that were enacted after 9/11, the Patriot Act thing, and I mean, it's not like I've read the thing front to back, because
No, but I think pretty much everybody has a good idea
Yeah.
of some of the frightening stuff that's in there, the FISA courts, and the ability to just collect massive amounts of data on all of us, just completely ignoring the Fourth Amendment. Yeah,
Well, yeah,
I mean,
this-
none of us have to read it front to back to know how appalling some of the stuff in the Patriot Act is.
Yeah, and it is, the power of the presidency seems to have evolved into a thing that almost would maybe appall the founders of our country.
I think there is no doubt it would appall them. From my interpretation of their writings is they were looking as the president as more of a figurehead. The House and the Senate do the legislating,
Right.
and then you just sign it.
Yeah.
You go around, you're a nice guy, you shake hands, you talk to kings.
Sure.
He wasn't really ever meant to be like a quote unquote leader, or somebody who sort of sets policy for
Sure.
Congress and Senate to follow up.
Right.
That's my interpretation. I think that's generally the conservative, libertarian, classic liberal kind of idea.
Well,
of,
and I think, I mean, I would agree with that as well. I mean, I don't think that. I mean, again, we certainly understand that we weren't looking for an elected king.
yeah, exactly.
And that, again, putting that much power in one individual position, I think would sort of be the antithesis of what this nation was founded on,
Yeah.
because they were sort of saying that this king thing is bullshit.
Yeah.
And we're not going to take it. We want representation
Yeah.
for all of us. And, I mean, again, none of these things are perfect in the way that they are, but
No. A more perfect union.
well, right, which we should all be striving for collectively. I think.
That's the verbiage they used. And,
Yeah.
yeah.
But so that, like I said, the powers of the presidency have evolved to a point. I mean, the Patriot Act being one piece of that too. That there's some of the things that you see. I mean, even as a liberal, even from the Obama administration, that I wasn't terribly impressed with. Trying to, I don't know. Use his power in a way that I don't know that it was designed to be used. And
Yeah, there was that one quote that he said at one point about what do you say? If you're not gonna work with me, I'm gonna go around you or something. He said to Congress, and
Yeah.
I think it was in regards to like the quote unquote dreamers. I can't remember, but yeah, he had some hairy quote about how he, if you're not going to work with me, I'll go around you or something. And then he
Right.
went on a spree of executive orders.
Yeah, well, and I think we're seeing that with the current administration as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so the thing is, and like you said, we have these.
They all try to outdo each other's record.
Yeah,
I'll do more.
Yeah, and I'm like, I don't know if that's the way that's supposed to work.
Right.
But so we do elect a president as a country, and again, I think we have an imperfect system for making that happen, and that's, I think, been demonstrated on numerous occasions in recent history, even. And so while we elect the president, we also then will elect our representatives, both for the House and for the Senate. And like you said, those are the folks that work on the actual legislating. And that's where that agenda comes from. And because there's so many more of those, and we get to vote for those people in a more local sense, I think that gets a little bit closer to actual representation.
Yep.
And, so when you're looking at a nationwide election for a president, I don't know that always accurately represents the majority of the country, even. And even, like I said, in recent history, Reagan had a pretty sounding win. Well, but
if you think about it, I don't think that they're not supposed to represent the majority of the country. The president. That's what our local representatives are for. I don't think any president is ever representative of the majority of the country, nor are they supposed to be. I think they're just they're just a person who won that office.
Right.
You know what I mean? There's no way, like, of all the 300+ million individuals, even if you try to break us into two camps of like progressive and conservative, and there's a lot of people who are going to reject falling into either one of those camps. But even if you like sort of somehow force that, you're still never going to get a majority. You know what I mean? You'll end up with people that are swing voters still, and so I think that's just sort of they're never going to represent us. A president's never going to represent the majority of the country. The president's going to be an individual, and he's going to be the president.
Right.
And I think we're seeing that more than ever. And I think maybe, if anything, we can get acceptance out of this administration of that. This guy's never going to represent us. Let's at least pick somebody who's not an asshole.
Well, that would be the goal. And I think talking about the majority of people, if you look at the breakdown of eligible voters for the last presidential election, there were more people who didn't vote than people who voted for either party. Because it's 20 some odd million on either side, but then there were like 40 million who didn't vote.
And I'm always wondering when I see those numbers, how many of the are felons counted in that?
That's a good question. I don't know.
Yeah, that's something. Is that eligible voters, or is that just population overall?
That's a good. I've never actually looked at a breakdown on that, but that's a good question.
Yeah, I would like to see that. And I would like to see felons vote too, frankly.
No, I think once they're out of prison,
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
you've done your time.
Yep.
Yeah, I think the same thing. Like, once you're in prison, you lose the right to vote, but once you're out of prison, you're out of prison.
Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, there have been some movements, obviously, to look at that, and it's gained some traction. I mean, people tend to look, I think, at the incarcerated population in an incredibly negative light for a lot of good reasons, but also there's a humanity that's removed from that. And being somebody who spent 10 years working in corrections, I see the humanity of the people who are incarcerated. Now, there are some truly despicable humans that I dealt with in that time frame. But that was a small minority compared to the majority of folks who have been incarcerated. And we're all one poor decision away from being,
absolutely.
from
The amount of things that are felonies are frightening.
you know, and I don't judge people based on that, because truthfully, there were a lot of really good people that I met who had been arrested and made some poor choices in life, and circumstances led to one thing or another. And I think that it's that's a population that I've advocated for historically, and I still do. But they're one that is not terribly sympathetic in the population at large, where, it's politically expedient on both ends to say that we're tough on crime, but people don't consider the repercussions of that action, and how do we disenfranchise people from society when they get involved in the criminal justice system.
Well, and on that note, off the top of my head, I think we should be able to separate being tough on crime from being tough on a criminal that is served his time.
Oh, absolutely.
There needs to be a big old separation there.
For sure. And there are some crimes that carry more long-term issues.
I'm never going to have any sympathy for child molesters.
Sure. But the thing is, though, that there are people who are classified as predatory offenders who are actually not child molesters. And
absolutely, I could get busted for taking a pee in an alley.
Right.
And be a registered sex offender.
Yeah, and then you have to register for 10 years.
Yeah, and then circle back to that. There's way too much stuff that's a felon. No.
Yeah. Well, and there are people too that, you actually have to register as a predatory offender if you kidnap someone. Now, that's still a terrible crime. Don't get me wrong. I'm not like saying it's okay or anything, but it is one of those things that a lot of times people don't know.
Well, and so let's take a very real hypothesis of somebody who owes a drug dealer money, and the drug dealer kidnaps them in order to scare them into paying them.
Yep.
Like this is, I don't know, Joey Diaz, the comedian. He spent time in prison for exactly that sort of situation where, I don't know. He's told the story a million times, but he went to jail for kidnapping this guy.
Yeah.
Like to have him register as a sex offender for trying to scare somebody into paying him money.
Yeah, it's still a phenomenally poor choice, but it is one of those things that, again, when you register as a predatory offender, there isn't a distinction. Like when you're on that registry, if the general populace doesn't know why you're on that registry, they just know that you're on it.
Yeah.
And they have different classifications, and there's some subtleties to that. Minnesota, I think, tries to do it in a way that is equitable to the crime and what have you, but it doesn't always work that way. I've seen people who had an indiscretion sexually when they were young, and what happens is if you violate your probation while you're in that registry period of 10 years, you get that extended. Huh. So let's say somebody in their teenage years does something like, say, a 17-year-old sleeps with a 14-year-old. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm not saying that's okay.
I think they would have to be 18 for it to be a crime, wouldn't it?
I don't know.
Well, let's say 18 and 16.
Yeah, so,
I'm a little more comfortable with that.
Okay, well, 18 and 15, because 16 is the age of consent. So let's say it's 18 and 15.
18 is age of consent in Minnesota.
No, 16. But still, really? But you have to be within certain months of age.
Okay, so there's some wiggle room and subtlety there?
Yeah, okay. So let's say it's 19 and 16, for argument's sake.
Okay.
Because that could easily happen. My wife, when I was married, was 6 years younger than me. We didn't get together. We got married when she was, 25. I was almost 31. So that's okay. But if you would have brought it back to when we were kids, that was a problem.
Yeah.
But anyway, so if you look at it, so let's say this 19-year-old gets arrested, has whatever with the 15-year-old, and then so you get put on the probation. The probation, in a lot of ways, I mean, the philosophy has shifted significantly in the last 20 or so years, but it's still sort of punitive. And it was not structured in a way that was set up to help people succeed. It was more set up to see them fail, my opinion. I'm sure there are going to be a bunch of people that argue with me about that, but that's just been my 20.
The comments question. The comment section is always surprisingly quiet. I would like to see some arguments in the comment section, actually.
Well, and again, there may be some people who disagree with me, but I'm saying this from experience and knowledge and seeing it. That the system was not necessarily set up to see people succeed. So, so a lot of times what will happen is, so drug offenses are a fairly common thing that cause people to violate. So if you violate and you continue to violate based on drug offenses, when they get together and they start to look at your level of predatory offense, because you have different classifications, 1, 2, 3. In the state of Minnesota. Now, 1 is considered the least likely to reoffend. 3 is considered the most likely to reoffend. 3 are the ones that they have to do the community notifications for. Those are the folks that you see in the newspapers and what have you.
Yep.
Now, again, I don't know all of the metrics and how they figure all these things out, but I have seen instances where people have had the young indiscretion, not reoffended sexually, but continued to reoffend through drug offenses, and then moved up the scale because one of the thoughts is that if you are under the influence, you are more likely to make a poor choice and reoffend. Now, again, that's sort of my interpretation of what I've seen, and it may not be exactly what happened. But there are some things there that I think are not really doing justice to a situation.
Yeah.
And, again, it's one of those things that sometimes, you've got like these assessments that you do for folks. And I mean, I've in the social work world, I've done plenty of assessing type things for people as well, and these assessments are supposed to be kind of a one size fits all. I mean, they're always working and tweaking and trying to make them better. But at the end of the day, we all know that it doesn't really work for everybody. And I think the same thing is true in the Department of Corrections. They have these assessments that are meant to be helpful, but oftentimes they discount some of the realities of the situation, and you're not allowed to factor those in real well. So people end up scoring in ways that isn't necessarily accurate for the real situation. So, and again, I mean that's a problem that we have in general assessments in the world. I mean, like I said, we always try to make them better, but they don't. I mean, each person's a person, and they all have all sorts of different factors that go into what happened at what time and where. And I mean, you're never going to make that perfect. I'm not expecting that. And I do think that the Minnesota Department of Corrections has made steps to try to do better, and they're going to continue to try to do better. But one of these things, I mean, if you look at it like the federal level drug offenses and stuff, I mean, look at people who have been punished, for drug offenses, particularly with some of the 3 strikes laws and stuff. You got people selling a bag of weed and end up in prison for 20 years. I don't know that that's really okay, and then they get this record that falls on with them, and I mean, you try to get employment, now you've been convicted of a drug offense. You can't even get an apartment. In a lot of places if you've been convicted of a quote-unquote drug offense. Now, they should probably look at selling heroin as being a little different than selling weed, but oftentimes they don't, because they just see, 5th degree, whatever, 4th degree sale, 3rd degree sale.
Well, and marijuana is technically is Schedule 1 federally, and heroin is Schedule 2 or 3. Because it has a medical use, like as if marijuana doesn't. So it's technically like federally they can hammer you worse
Oh, yeah.
In some ways.
Yeah.
I mean, by weight, you're screwed on heroin. But
Right.
that's
LSD too.
Oh my God,
That's done some pretty nasty things to some people.
Micrograms, yeah. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Circle back to something I wrote down here of sort of like how people can be criminals. I heard the story recently of a pastor who he signed a piece of paper saying that these people had gone through their complete 9 weeks of marriage counseling or whatever before they got married, right? And they'd only done like 6 weeks, but he falsified the paperwork to rush them through for whatever reason, for some, to appease them for whatever reason,
Sure.
for something they. So, anyways, their marriage ends up falling apart, and she ends up like telling this to, the courts or whatever, that they never even finished their marriage counseling. And here this priest ends up having to, plead out and become a felon because, right? Because he falsified some paperwork. And, this is, where I, as a libertarian, is like, well, the government shouldn't be getting involved in marriage in any way, shape, or form. And this is a great example how, like, man, this guy's now a felon. A priest is now a felon for trying to help out a couple, jumping to avoid the red tape of government to get married, and despite the fact that it fell apart later on, you can either say it applies or it doesn't, but like I said, if the government's not involved, then this guy just, there's been a zillion shotgun weddings in this world.
Right.
There's no reason to make a felon out of a priest because he falsified some paperwork. There's no reason for the government to be involved in marriage, ultimately. And if they weren't, then it wouldn't be a problem.
Yeah, I don't.
Yeah, it's a weird one, isn't it?
It is. I mean, that situation is certainly extreme and ridiculous. And
the fact that he wasn't able to plead out of a felony is mind blowing to me.
That is a little strange, because usually,
They'll plead you down.
Yeah, I say criminal justice system because that's what it's called. I often like to refer to it as criminal injustice system because that's more my opinion. And there are going to be lawyer friends of mine who probably got really angry to hear me say that right now.
Judicial system.
Yeah, well.
One beer and I can't.
Well, judicial system is more of a broad term because I think that then looks at civil and other things. I'm
Sure.
particularly looking at the criminal aspect of it.
Sure.
But it is...
No crime, no victim.
Right.
No victim, no crime.
Well, however they want to look at it. Because I've been going to court with people for civil and criminal offenses since 2001. So I've spent a lot of time, not necessarily as someone who's speaking, but certainly observing the process, over the years. So I got a pretty good idea of at least how it works in Minnesota. And it doesn't, the thing is, like a lot of these systems, most of the people who are involved in it are well-intentioned, but the system itself often doesn't allow things to proceed in a way that benefits all parties. Like one of the things that I've done in my life I got involved for a little while with I can't remember the name of it. Well, I worked at a juvenile detention center for a number of years, and then I moved on to the adult jail. And then I was involved with Port Group Homes for a little while too, and they do all these different levels of interventions. Okay, so now I remember that I was getting myself some time to remember. Restorative justice is the thing that I was looking for. So I got involved with the Lakes Area Restorative Justice people for a period of time. And, I went through their training on how to sort of mediate discussions between two parties who, what they would say is the offender, perhaps, they have other terms, and the person who was the victim or whatever. Again, differing terms for however you want to refer to that, but the basic concept is to bring both parties together in a way that's healing for both. And so that it allows the community to, it's not necessarily forgive, but make peace with what happened on both ends. Now, there's some things that's obviously going to be pretty difficult for. I mean, murder is a pretty big one, but they have actually facilitated those types of meetings for people who've murdered and family members of the person who'd been murdered, and been fairly successful with those. Way beyond my skill set. But, for community, like say a kid graffitis your restaurant or something, or maybe it's a group of kids, and so you're obviously ticked off because now you got to spend your time and money trying to fix it, and these kids are 15 years old, so how are you going to, you can't sue them, but, instead of putting them into the criminal system and having them set up on probation where they may or may not be successful, you do like an alternative thing when we bring in this mediation.
Make them come and wash my dishes.
Well, yeah. Or something like that. And so it does some really significant things where it gets them to understand a little bit about your, like how that impacted your life. And when they can understand that, they're gonna hopefully look at it and go, well, I don't want to do that again. I didn't know.
Yeah.
I thought it was a victimless crime. You were just having some fun.
Yeah.
But then they get to see how that impacted your life, and you're like, well, now I had to spend, instead of the money that I was supposed to spend on buying products for this week, I had to take some money out of that, and then I ran short on my Big Friday, or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm just weird scenario, but so these kids get to see how their actions impact other people, and hopefully that helps them grow. And then it also, as the person who's the one who was offended on, you get the ability to see that the kids are humans too, and that maybe they weren't maliciously going after you as a person. They did make a poor choice, and it did have an impact, but that they also are humans who made a mistake, and then now they can make reparations for that. And that's, you can't bring that model in to deal with everything on the planet, certainly. But I think just like our discussions, we can bring the humanity level in and recognize that though there may be some disagreements on things, we're not all bad people.
Right.
And we all live in this community together, and it's going to be a lot better if we understand each other and work together than it is if we try to fight each other and be pissed off all the time.
Right.
And so I feel that I'm a very fortunate person because I've been able to look at these systems from the inside and the outside in a lot of ways, and that shapes my perception of it pretty significantly. And a lot of what I do in the world, I when I hear people make broad generalizations on things, I try to give them accurate information, because most of the time people are making judgments based on misinformation or very small,
skewed information.
Yeah. And I'm prone to that as well. I mean, I
think we all are.
We talked before about confirmation bias and things like that. And I mean, again, I'm certainly guilty of it as well. I seek out information that reinforces what I already believe. I mean, we all do that, but I do try to be very diligent about finding the truth, or at least the best part of it that I can find.
Right.
And I don't harbor any ill will toward people who, in my opinion, are looking at things and sharing things without the right information. I just seek to give them better information. And I think that often comes off wrong, or it gets misperceived. We did the Facebook stuff all the time. I mean, you and I have gotten into it.
It's the greatest miscommunication tool in the world.
It is, and I think that people get into these big kerfuffles and they don't actually know realistically what the other person's trying to say.
Yeah.
You know, because they're reading that person's text with their own filter.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I do that too. I mean, I get kind of pissy about stuff. I mean,
Well, you can lay out what it seems like the most basic, easy sentence, but again, you're wording it from your perspective,
right?
And somebody else reading, even if you're both speaking English and you both spoke it your entire life, they still they're filtering that and interpreting it.
Absolutely.
Even if they say, "What do you mean?" And you're like, "I don't mean anything other than what I specifically said." And they're like, "Well, explain further."
Well, and that's but that's the thing. Like, human communication involves so much more than words.
Yeah. And that's why Facebook is such a horrible miscommunication tool, because you're missing all of those social cues, that body language, all of that stuff. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's really easy to come off condescending when you're trying to just be earnest and warm.
Absolutely. And I mean, the tone, you can't set a tone without hearing the voice, and like you said, reading the body language.
Yeah.
And that happens so much, and I think that's one of those things that has led to more of this increase in tribalism.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Because people get, I can't believe what that guy said. Well, but did you really know what they were saying if you just read some words? I mean, that's
right.
the interesting thing about the legal profession, and I'm not a lawyer, but I've been around a lot of them my whole life.
Oh, my condolences.
Well, it's just the way I was raised. But the thing is that their language is very specific in law.
Yeah.
For a reason. And I mean, obviously to remove emotion from it, because laws shouldn't be written emotionally. That would be terrible. But they're still sometimes really dumb. But at least the language is there to make it very specific, hopefully, so that people understand what the point of it is. And even with those things, there is some room for interpretation, obviously, as we see, on a frequent basis. People are interpreting laws one way or the other. It's interesting because I have clients who live in like 7 or 8 different counties that I work with. And they all receive health insurance through the state Medicaid program, MA. But that it varies from county to county as to how those things are always implemented. So it's the same law for the state, right? And it's stuff that comes from the federal level even. But when it's implemented at the county level, it's all different. I mean, sometimes it's just very slightly different.
Yeah.
But it makes it very complicated for me to do my job, because each one, and again, a lot of that boils down to each county's interpretation of that specific law. Even though, again, specific, it should be pretty specific. But there's some leeway to go in there. So again, I guess my world is like a giant gray area of everything.
Well, I mean, literally, that's like what circuit courts and the Supreme Court and all those things do, is they interpret the law.
Correct. Yeah.
So, I mean, it's not as if that... It's not. It doesn't. It definitely needs interpreting.
Yeah.
But just really quick, I love what you said there. You said laws should be written emotionally.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're saying legislation from emotion is a bad idea, even if that emotion is caring.
Well, yeah. Typically, yeah. I mean, it. Yeah, that's.
I like I said, it's just where I like to approach things from a philosophical standpoint.
Yeah.
Because I think I totally agree with you there. But that's something I think we see. I think traditionally, that's probably something we see more from the left, is this extreme emotion to an event and then wanting to
legislate it.
Very specifically, something easy to point to is, mass shootings. Every time there's a mass shootings, there's these outcry for more gun laws. I love that you said that, because it's like, we can agree on that. We can find some room to talk about something there.
Well,
but hey, let's take a little break and grab another beer.
Sure.
And then we can talk about stuff.
Sounds good.
All right.